welcome to my new religion. You're invited to participate by pretending that you're a part of the religion. First thing you need to do is have an open mind as you're watching the video and listen. I'm going to open a discussion about other religions. And I did a historical research that I thought was fascinating, and I just wanted to let you in on the basic information. We're talking about Judaism here, the Judaic history, and we're talking about Egyptian. As I had mentioned at the end of the other vlog, I was going to get into ancient Egypt. So, if you know your basic history of religion and also history of nations, ancient civilization, you have heard of Exodus. And Exodus is from the biblical account of basically how Moses was able to gather together the Israelites, which are the founding group of the Jews, and before it got all differentiated up until the point we have now. So it's like you don't even know what's a Jew anymore. There's so many different kind of Jews, just as there are so many kind of Christians and Hindus and Buddhists and so on and so forth. So our focus now is going to be about the origins and see how even back then it's hard to say under the guidance of Moses during his time who were his people, who were these new Israelites. They started out in Egypt, and basically you can find out all this information if you're interested. It's widely known and well publicized. People, curiously enough, are going to pick on the Jews for keeping such good records and writing so many books. I mean, the Bible is basically the Jewish core book from back in the days, and it's the most widely read, most widely propagated book ever. It's the first printed book, mass printing, as far as history is telling us. But what I wanted to say, because you can find all this, and most of you really should be quite familiar with it if you're going to discuss religious history. But here's the rub. We find out everything basically through the Bible and through associated books that really depend upon the Bible. So there's nothing that typically we can say corroborates that, even though you find a lot of archaeological work and evidence that could be used to back up the stories in the Bible, the old history of it, like in the 5 books where Moses was concerned, like Numbers, Deuteronomy, Leviticus, even parts of Genesis. And there's another one. Let me know if you can remember that one, the 5th book of the first 5 books. And now, obviously there's people that object to it because they don't want to know that the Bible can be proven. It's ancient history, so it's really difficult to prove, just like it's hard to prove something in the ancient Sumerian culture or the ancient Chinese or anything ancient. Indus Valley civilization, Roman, even Greek, and then you go way back to Atlantean, which is like legendary, and people don't even try to prove it. They just say, oh, it's just a story. So here's what happens in this new documentary that is put out, and really the subject here I want to bring your attention to. They've been able to line up this whole story in the Bible of Moses and the Exodus with ancient Egyptian history. They've been able to line it up because they found that they could parallel everything, whereas prior to this, the thinking is that things don't line up. You have to have the correlation between the biblical history, which is written down by the Jews of that time, the Israelites, and the hieroglyphic writings, which is written by the ancient Egyptians. And if you're not able to correlate that, then they don't seem to be supporting each other. And that's been the strange thing all along. This has been the strange thing. And I'm going to suggest here that quite possibly both parties, or many other parties on the outside, including Christian and Muslim, may not want us to find out the truth. Just like with what's a common accusation against the Vatican, that they have a secret library and they don't want anybody to know what the books are saying. So they keep the library under lock and key. This is true. It's a conspiracy of silence, a conspiracy to hide facts. And we don't know what facts because they're hidden. So, we know that these things are going on in the world because there's competing factions. And that's what has to do with competing religions, and why our religion, since you're pretending to be in my religion right now, is opening a discussion, opening the mind, and finding all the truths in the religion so all of them can be in harmony. Now, what lines up? You're saying, what's the correlation? Well, it seems that it has to do with chronology, and it has to do with the fact that you have to get your dates right. And we really need to see that one of the pharaohs, which is said to reign in the year of 1550 BC until 1525 BC, so it's approximately a 25-year reign. Now, if you see that this is accurate, you also see that the Exodus could be timed either during this or right before it. And this is a change from what people had been estimating as the time of the Exodus. Now, 1500 or thereabouts BC, 1500 BC, is almost 500 years before the reign of King David of the Israelites fame, and then his son, the successor, King Solomon, who I believe started his reign right before 1000 BC, and the temple of King Solomon's glory was built around 980 something BC. It was a long project, so there was a beginning and an end to that whole thing, and then it was open for business, if you want to call it business, religious business. Now, it doesn't necessarily change the date that they've estimated for King David and King Solomon. It just changes the date for when Moses actually lived and embarked on that exodus, taking the people up towards where they were going to settle as Israelis, the original Israelites, and taking over Jerusalem so that King David could be eventually put into power. It only changes the date of when Moses is, because they weren't sure how to pinpoint it. But now we see, by lining up the information in the Bible with the information in the Egyptian hieroglyphics, their history, it seems to fit very nicely. And of course they have different languages. You know that. So there's confusion as far as which word is referring to which other word, the same object of two different words. Which words line up to the same things. So I'm going to throw some terms at you, and you may have heard them before. The Hyksos. Hyksos is a derivative form of what the Egyptians used to call the people that they didn't like, that were living in the eastern part of the Nile Delta, and they were living in that lower country and over toward into the Sinai Peninsula. Now the land was slightly different then. Slightly different. We're talking about 3,500 years ago, but they had actually gotten there going closer to 4,000 years ago when they first started coming in, these Hyksos. So when it became a problem, because it was looming, you know, they weren't getting along, and these Hyksos were invading from the north. You know, that whole area there was Canaanites, Canania, and it was Syria, and up into what's now Turkey, and also Greece. The ancient Greeks were not, you know, up to par yet. They had little villages, and they were forming like, you know, Argos and Sparta and this type of thing, these types of cities. So, but a lot of the people were moving around and migrating, and they were getting down into Egypt, which was at the height of civilization, back and forth during those days. They had the different dynasties. So what happened was there's a strife between the people that were coming in and then the ruling power, the original regime in Egypt at that time. Well, the more original. So there's a problem. So the new immigrants, you know, they were different people. We see that today in the modern world. So back then, here's another example of it, that they didn't like the foreigners. They were getting too uppity and too powerful. And what it came down to was during the 18th dynasty, going into the 19th dynasty, there were two particular names you need to think about, and the Pharaoh was, I'm going to look at it here because I have it, AhMoses. AhMoses, and see, look at the name. Very interesting. AhMoses the first was in charge over all of Egypt, except he had a problem with the new area there, and their main city was Hyksos. I'm sorry, it's at the tip of my tongue right now. But there was a major city there that was really ruled over by the Hyksos. Okay? So Ahmoses the first was in charge of his 18th dynasty. And he was having fights. They were making battle. It was basically civil war. And they had to purge these people out. The Egyptians didn't want those people to be Egyptians anymore. So they would lay siege to certain cities, and they just wanted to push them out and take over and go back to more traditional Egyptian ways of life and rulership. So Ahmoses struggled with this for a long time. You know, what's interesting is in the Hebrew biblical account that was written by Moses and the Israelites, for the Israelites, they don't mention the name of the Pharaoh. So, you know, he didn't want to respect him enough to say his name. He just said that, you know, the ruler of Egypt. But apparently it happens to be AhMoses. And what happened was he fought them, and apparently he's credited with purging them out. And his sons, his heirs, were dying. Apparently 2 of them died. So this is also part of the biblical account, that the Pharaoh's son was deceased at a very young age, and he didn't have any heir, and it had to pass on to someone quite young under him, one of his other sons, whose name is Amenhotep I. Amenhotep is the one that I mentioned from 15... Actually, no, I didn't. I mentioned the reign of AhMoses, which one was from 1550 to 1525 or 26, and Amenhotep reigned from 1526 to 1506. And basically, he was not such a strong king, they're saying, the son of AhMoses. And you can only imagine that maybe after losing all the Israelites and defeating the Hyksos, their power was drained. Their power and a lot of the people went away to form the new Israel under Moses. And they don't want to talk about it. See, you cannot find a lot of it talked about in the ancient Egyptian accounts. But I thought this is fascinating because this kind of work hasn't been done prior to this. I had never heard of this correlation being done before, so it's pretty amazing revelation. Now, I'm not going to buy into all of it hook, line, and sinker. A lot of things that I heard in the documentary were very shocking, and I would need a lot more proof. But the suggestion of how these things line up, and the fact that the extraction of the Israelites, which Moses was able to pull out of that area and steal away from the Egyptians, partially steal them away, and partially because Ahmoses I just wanted to purge them out anyhow. But he was reluctant to let certain ones leave. If you remember, Moses was struggling with them and telling them, you better let them leave. And Ahmoses, the Pharaoh, was saying, I'm not going to let them go. So he didn't want certain ones to go, but yet the other ones, he just wanted to fight them and get rid of them. So there was a mixture. It was kind of hard to sort them out, but you can see through the course of this struggle, they did get separated. And Moses was able to extract certain ones that he could get and bring them out on this journey up into the new land. And as you know, after Exodus, or during it, they wandered and they had to kill off like half the people because they struggled with who was going to be in charge, what law they were going to follow. And this, of course, is the most famous part. If you want to look at one part, that's when the 10 Commandments, or the law of Moses, the Mosaic Code, was placed upon those people. So, in conclusion, you're going to have to investigate this on your own. I can only start the process with this video. In the religion that we have, we could discuss it day and night. This is just really fascinating stuff for us to come to realize how the religions can get together by knowing our histories are interlinked, and why we struggle like this when we can really just sit down and discuss things, discuss the past, and have a better idea how to go forward with the future. But the conclusion of this particular part of history, this part of time around 1500 BC, is that the Hyksos, which were the ones that the Pharaoh and the Egyptians battled to send them out to the north again, where they came from. The Hyksos are really to be somewhat equated with the new Israelites, the people that Moses took away from Egypt. Okay? That's the conclusion to this. This is, in case you don't get a sense of what this is, it's very incredible. This is a shocking revelation. And I'm telling you that I find it is sounding quite valid, as I've explained here, just the basics. Thanks for listening. Discuss this all you want. If you've got a comment, post it below. Share this with all your friends, favorite it, and make sure you're subscribed because YouTube